Will Garcia. Oh, the broadcast just went live.
Oh. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Earl.
And I'm Will Garcia, and today we have a very special guest. If you've been on RMBA for anything more than like a week, you've probably heard of user L Davies 93, real name Leon Davies. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, I saw a couple of your previews, and yeah, they're really fun and informative. So when you offered for me to, talk about the Pacers, yeah, I thought it was a good opportunity. So yeah.
Right on, man. Thanks a bunch for coming on.
Dude, Will, he likes our stuff. That's awesome.
He likes our stuff. This is so cool. Oh my god. Okay. In all seriousness, this team had a pretty solid year, didn't they, Leon?
Yeah, I mean, before the All-Star break, it was a ridiculously good year.
Yeah.
It was like the first full NBA season I was watching, so
What?
yeah, so I was just I was like, wow, this is I should have done this like years ago because this is a lot of fun. Like we always keep winning. That's a lot of fun. And then
oh, I'm sorry.
and then like it soon just tailed off into this black depression and yeah.
Yeah.
And I think yeah.
Pretty much. The Pacers did go 56-26, but like you mentioned, it was kind of a tale of two seasons in one season. Like you mentioned, it got off to a ridiculously hot start, first in the league for a while. But after around the All-Star break, things kind of went downhill. They did make it to the conference finals against the Miami Heat. They took them to 6 games. They kind of got it back together around playoff time. But it was, a real roller coaster of a year.
Yeah.
I think our defense was also falling apart a bit, but I think obviously the main issues were on the offensive end. Yeah, after the All-Star break, we were 29th in offensive rating, and the only team we were actually less efficient on that end was the Philadelphia 76ers. So,
And is that really a team?
Yeah,
technically it qualifies.
Technically.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think they weren't a team. I think it was like all an elaborate joke, but
like the entire NBA got punked.
Ashton Kutcher comes out as general manager.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was some of the good stuff that happened for the Pacers last year, Josh?
Well, I mean, there were a few things that went decently well offensively. They did finish 5th at in the paint shot attempts, and they shot well from a couple of areas over the course of the season. Obviously, there were 2 seasons in one, but they wound up ending the season 4th in field goal percentage from 3 to 10 feet.
Yeah.
2nd in the main mid-range area, 16 to 3-point range, and they were 5th in corner 3 percentage. They also were tied for 9th in free throw per field goal attempt, so they did at least get to the line pretty decently.
Absolutely, and then on defense, this was, again, arguably the best defense in the league. They finished 1st in defensive rating, 1st in defensive effective field goal percentage, and they had plus defenders at pretty much every position in almost most of the lineups. And then they also have one of the best rim protectors alive in Roy Hibbert. So having that all together, that team defense, that really worked wonders.
Yeah.
I think obviously, I mean, because with our scheme, it's very conservative. Like if you look at, for example, how we defend the pick and roll, we're not going to have any help defenders. So, and it's the same with when we're defending pin downs and flare screens, things like that. So obviously, we're going to have a lot of driving lanes open, and really, we're going to rely a lot on Roy Hibbert, and I think the numbers at the end of the season, they kind of show how incredibly impressive he was, especially during the first half of the season on that end. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And then defensively, just going to run through a couple stats right quick. They finished second in Ian Levy's XPPS statistic, which, that's his expected points per shot. So they were forcing teams into rough shots. And then first in defensive points per shot. Then when you have a guy like Roy Hibbert, it's not that surprising. They got the fourth fewest shots on the rim against them. And that really solid team defense, third fewest corner threes, the ninth fewest above the break threes, and they forced the second most mid-range shots. So it wasn't only just having a bunch of good post defenders. Stan Van Gundy said it best. You can get a bunch of really good defenders all on a team, but if the plan isn't solid, they aren't going to be defending jack. And this plan was really solid, and it forced opposing teams into a lot of ineffective shots.
yeah, definitely. I think it's really the luxury of having, like, especially in the starting lineup, having 5 just excellent lockdown defenders. I think, like, even someone like George Hill, who I think is pretty underrated on the defensive end. He's got great mobility. I very rarely see him like getting stuck in screens and things like that. And I think it just shows the merit of having 5 excellent lockdown defenders, and then obviously you don't need to help so much, and you're not giving up corner threes and things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch that kind of defense, because it's always fun to watch someone like Paul George, really like locking down on his man. So yeah,
absolutely.
The one thing else that they also did pretty damn well was they didn't really bail teams out by sending them to the line. So they played really tight defense on people, and you had Hibbert, the king of verticality, dissuading shots at the rim and contesting shots at the rim. And they still were 9th in defensive free throw per field goal attempt. So, I mean, it's really impressive considering, like Leon said, how fundamental it is in their defensive system to kind of funnel guys towards Hibbert.
Yeah.
That they didn't give up a lot of free throws. And they also did a really good job of preventing second chances by finishing second in defensive rebound rate, which, a lot of people look at Hibbert's rebound stats and, they're not the greatest.
Yeah, but Lance steals like 2 of them.
Yeah, Lance steals like 2 of them. You got good rebounders in David West. Paul George gets his fair share of rebounds. And even George Hill is a guard who has a 6'9" wingspan. So, They have a lot of guys capable of crashing the boards.
Absolutely, but not everything was positive for this Pacers team. They really struggled offensively, finishing 23rd in offensive rating. This had a fair amount to do with their shot selection. This team was only 26th at shots at the rim, 22nd in shots from above the break 3, and they took the 8th most mid-range jumpers of last year. So it wasn't the most analytically solid shot distribution, but a lot of that is a bit systemic, right, Leon?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because we kind of ran we were making this sort of, or attempting the sort of shots which our defense would want to try and to force the opponents to make. So it's kind of funny, but I think, like you said, it was really, I saw it as systemic personally. I think we had like good offensive play. Well, I think we had some very good offensive players, but there was just so little ball movement, and especially off-ball movement. I think that was a big thing, and I think things, even like little things like our screening, like Roy Hibbert is really not a good screener. Like fundamentally,
I noticed.
Screener. He never. He never gets down low, and he's always tilting his body to kind of reach out for someone. So it's just really easy for someone to go around that screen. And I just think things like that. And we had a big turnover problem. yeah, during the whole season, and I think it got worse really as the season went on, and
Yeah, they
yeah,
finished 26th in turnover percentage. So
yeah,
yeah, you're right.
it's not fun as a fan. It's not fun to watch
No.
that. And I think when you have like five guys standing around, you need the ball handler to be able to, cut inside to create something. That's the only way you're going to create something if you've got literally five guys standing around. And
Absolutely.
I think Lance was able to do that consistently, and he was great for us throughout the season offensively. But then George Hill, for example, he, according to Synergy, he was like bottom three amongst all point guards for cuts into the lane.
Wow.
So yeah, it's things like that. And Paul George is definitely, obviously, he made huge improvements over the last two seasons. And I think one of the big things we saw him improve is his ability to attack off the dribble, especially off the pick and roll. But, he's still not quite like an elite facilitator. He's a very good facilitator, especially for his size. And but I think again, even on the individual level, he really suffered from a turnover problem as well, where he'd often get caught. I noticed like a lot of teams would, when defending him on the pick and roll, they would hedge pretty wide to try and like entice him to try and split the defense, and which I guess they did because they felt like his handles weren't that great, although they're obviously pretty good for his size. And we saw him like losing the ball a lot in those situations, and he has like one of the worst post-entry passes I've ever seen. It's really bad. But so yeah, I mean, there was stuff like that which kind of made it bad. And then obviously you had Hibbert, who he was never, he's never like a Hakeem Olajuwon, but
No,
as the season
not at all.
went on, offensively, it got like kind of depressing. I think a lot of it for him was mental. He said that it was really, on some levels, he couldn't really accept the fact that his role on the offensive end was decreasing, and he felt like that affected his game. So I think there was obviously a big mental side to it, but I think even fundamentally, if you look at his technique, especially his footwork, he's he's not like fundamentally that sound. You often see him like, like instead of like most players when they post up, they'll have 1 foot behind them essentially, so that they can take fairly big steps either way, and if they want to dribble as well. Whereas Hibbert would kind of like, he'd have his feet like in an equal stance, and he'd kind of be shuffling like almost like a penguin, like really slowly, and he wouldn't be able to do anything. And he didn't have. I mean, he only has like one move, which I don't know if you guys watch Inside the NBA, but Shaq refers it to as that ugly Georgetown flip shot or something like that. He has like this weird running hook shot, and he's just not very effective by it. And I think the weird thing about Hibbert actually is that most low post players, they'll always look to attack. They'll always look to finish with one hand. So like they might look to finish with their right hand, or they might look to always finish with their left hand. Whereas Hibbert, he just always looked to finish with that running hook shot. And so on the left block where he could do that and finish with the right hand, he had okay numbers. I think he was over 50% in those situations. But then on the right block where he would end up shooting with his left hand, he was much less efficient. And so it was kind of interesting that I thought that. And but yeah, overall the offense was a mess. We had horrible spacing as well. Like not many people really shoot threes at a decent rate. I mean, we saw like Lance Stevenson was probably our main ball handler, and we just saw all the time people slipping under his screens and things like that, because they know he's not, he's a decent 3-point shooter. He's not like ridiculously bad, but he's not going to worry anyone either. with that. So, yeah, it was just tough, you know. I think all the things you need for a good offense, you know, we were lacking, so it was kind of tough.
Yeah. What was interesting was even when they got like high value shots, they didn't really convert them. I mean, they wound up 22nd in field goal percentage at the rim, and they were 22nd in field goal percentage from above the break threes. So even when they got, you know, really good high value shots, that they weren't really hitting them.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, that's indicative of some of our players. Like, I don't think Hill is a particularly great finisher. You know, obviously Hibbert, he didn't do particularly well, especially as the season progressed, you know, around the basket. But I think it's also indicative of really our offense, you know, how, you know, because if the ball's not moving and if players aren't moving, then you're not going to get like open shots, you're not going to get semi-open driving lanes, any of that. So yeah, it was pretty ugly, but
Yeah. Will, they did do one good thing though, right? In terms of at least getting, well, it wasn't good. They didn't really get offensive rebounds at all either, considering how many shots they missed at the rim. I think they finished like 21st in offensive rebound rate. I think Will might have dropped out on us or something.
all right.
His video seems a little frozen. So we'll
I can see him, but I can't hear him. So
yeah. Well, while Will works on that, we'll talk a little bit about what didn't really go well for them defensively, which obviously they were a defensive kingpin, really. But they gave up some highly valuable shots. They wound up 27th in expected points per shot, part of which, like you mentioned, is somewhat systemic, kind of in wanting to send people to Hibbert because they know they have the king of verticality there to contest those shots without necessarily getting called for fouls for it. The refs have bought in. The refs are drinking the verticality Kool-Aid pretty heavily, I think. And even not just shots at the rim, but they gave up the 21st worst in terms of attempts in the paint. So the opponents were able to get in the paint and shots at the rim against the Pacers. They were very lucky in that regard that they had Hibbert, and to a lesser extent, Mahinmi does a pretty decent job, I think, as a rim protector too.
yeah, no, he was. I think he was definitely like a fan favorite. You know, throughout the season, everyone was. I think the bench was kind of something everyone was complaining about, but I think Mahinmi was consistently a very good rim protector. He's also pretty mobile. You know, so it was a good mix. Yeah, as you said, you know, some of that is systemic. You know, if you play conservatively, then on defense, then obviously you're going to give up driving lanes, unfortunately, and there's no way of going around that. And you know, it's the same with our pick and roll defense. If you ice the ball, then you know you're going to kind of corral the players into Hibbert, and yeah, I think it's just kind of it's a testament to how dominant Hibbert was, really as a rim protector. But yeah, I think yeah. So I think, but that's kind of an interesting stat, and it's kind of interesting to think if that'll change at all this season. You know, if now that we're missing some of that lockdown, some of those lockdown defenders elsewhere, are we going to need help? And how's that going to affect things? So it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting in a bad way, but
yes.
That's.
Once again, kind of talking about systemic stuff and how that might make some things look negative. They were only 22nd in terms of forcing opponent turnovers, but and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, that a lot of that was systemic in the sense that they're more of one of those teams that's focused on forcing opponents to really use up a lot of shot clock and take tough shots, as opposed to trying to generate turnovers by gambling for steals.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, I mean, I think the main way you're going to force turnovers is either through pressuring the ball handler, which we didn't really want, which we didn't do too much. You know, Hill wasn't that wasn't part of his game, or obviously by kind of packing the passing lanes. And again, you know, we didn't really do that. So, you know, we didn't really have much help defense. Paul George was given kind of a free role as a help defender, interestingly. But I think that was probably because Vogel, you know, looked at his wingspan, looked at his speed, looked at his eyes, his hands, and said, "I'd be an idiot if, you know, I didn't let him play some help defense." Really,
he's my free safety on the court. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, apart from him, we very rarely had like any sort of help defense, unless obviously the ball was forced, you know, onto like the corners. Then we would kind of play a strong side zone, as most teams do nowadays. But yeah, if the ball was like near the top of the key, or you know, if someone was driving inside, then we weren't really going to help. And I think, you know, we didn't really pressure the ball handlers so much. So I think, personally, I think it was more systemic. But you know.
Talking about help defense is a easy way to help transition to some players they added this offseason with the idea that they will help. One guy they added, and I'll have to cover this for Will since he's still having some technical difficulties. Perhaps he's having technical difficulties so he could avoid talking about this particular player, because Will really doesn't like this guy. Rodney Stuckey was kind of the big name that they brought over this offseason. He's kind of this combo. He's thought to be like a combo guard who can create his own looks, but Will has his doubts about him being either of those things, and I tend to be inclined to believe Will, since he had to sit through a lot of Rodney Stuckey in Detroit. Stuckey has a career 51% true shooting percentage, and he's really good at getting to the line and making free throws. But Will says he telegraphs his moves on offense. He's almost always either going to drive to the lane or shoot a pull-up. He's pretty lackadaisical on defense, which is part of the reason why Will thinks he's maybe not going to get a major opportunity on the Pacers, because he thinks Vogel's not going to let him play. I'm inclined to think Stuckey's going to get a lot of minutes, unfortunately. Another guy they brought in, C.J. Miles. A little more positive thought on C.J. Miles. The last two seasons, he shot 38.4% from three and 39.3% respectively. So having a consistent three-point shooter who won't lose minutes due to poor defense is probably something Vogel's going to like, and something that he'll probably give CJ a fair amount of minutes because of that. Have you gotten a chance to see much of CJ in the preseason? How's he looking?
Yeah, he didn't look amazing, but you know, I got to see him a bit last season in Cleveland and things, and he, I mean, I think he's clearly there mainly to space the floor, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, last season 39.3%, that was his best season in terms of
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and what I saw of him, you know, he's a very good shooter. He's got good mechanics and everything. He's got a fairly quick release. And he's not, like you said, he's not really a liability on the defensive end. He's, you know, I think he'll be a pretty useful addition. Stuckey, I was saying to Will, I felt like maybe 3 years ago he may have been like a good backup, but Will reassured me that that wasn't the case. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he's I think he was, because he was brought in like as contract negotiations were still going on with Lance.
Yeah.
So I think I hope that they did at that point they were still thinking, okay, well, we'll be able to keep Lance, and I think he was just there basically to create some dribble penetration for maybe the second unit.
Yeah.
Not much else really. But now the Lance is gone. Paul George obviously is gone. It's kind of worrying that he is probably going to get quite a lot of minutes, and he's going to have to do a bit more than just dribble. And yeah, I mean his shooting numbers aren't great. Suppose he's been working on that, and he's he also said he's very happy to be in Indiana. So. Which I guess everyone says. But
yeah, that's at least a positive we can say about Stuckey.
That's probably one of the few positives. But yeah, I think he may be useful. I mean, I saw in the preseason the plays were pretty stagnant, so I think he could be pretty useful if that were to be the case. But to be fair, from what I saw of the game tonight against the 76ers, we had a bit more structures in our offense, so I don't think he'll be that useful. But I think one of the big things we were missing really, because obviously Lance was our main creator, but then he was also someone who was always looking to get the defensive boards, so we really missed a lot of like transition opportunities, which for a defensive team can be huge, really. So I think, and that's what I saw from this game in the 76ers, which I was kind of pleased with. I think in transition it'll be pretty useful. But yeah, I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to win.
To put us both out of the misery of talking this much about Stuckey, what are your thoughts on Damjan Rudesh so far? I know, looking at some of the video from him, internationally speaking, he appears to be a really good off-ball threat, and he's flashed some hints of pick-and-roll skill in EuroLeague. And I know the expectation is he's going to bring some floor spacing to the Pacers, much like C.J. Miles, something that they could really use. How has he looked in the preseason and in the game against the Sixers so far?
Yeah, in the preseason he looked pretty good, and as you said, he has great shooting mechanics. He gets surprisingly good lift for a guy of that size off the floor. And I think his numbers in his last season were pretty good from 3-pointers. I think, from what I saw, he also had like decent court vision. And he's a decent dribbler for a guy of that size. I think for me the big questions, I think offensively is he can be pretty useful. As like a deep rotate, as like for a couple whatever minutes he'll give us, whatever few minutes he'll give us. But I think my worry is more the defensive end. I don't think he's, I think technically he's not that great, but I think the main worries for me are like athletically, because I don't think he can keep up with most threes in the league. And I don't know that he's strong enough really for a lot of fours as well in the league. And so yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of worried. I'm kind of wondering, how it'll go on that end. From what I saw in the preseason, it didn't look great, but maybe, I mean, things like that anyway improve over time.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll get better. I don't know.
One guy that, at least in my opinion, doesn't really seem to have gotten that much better over time with the Wizards, but was brought in this offseason by the Pacers, was Chris Singleton. He's a solid defender, and he can play some 4 defensively when the other team does like small ball lineups, and if you want to try to match that, you could probably put him in there as a small ball 4 defender, but he doesn't really give you much of anything offensively.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, like I said, I think from what I've seen defensively is pretty decent. But yeah, I really, I didn't see anything on the other end of the floor which really made me like stay awake at night, with excitement. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'm not too excited about him, but we'll see.
Yeah. One thing we'll also see this year is the impact the loss of Lance Stevenson. And also, Paul George is still on the roster, but Paul George is most likely out for the entire year. So chances are he'll probably not play this year. So you're talking about the absence of arguably the 2 primary offensive players and the 2 primary perimeter defenders for this Pacers team. And Lance had a pretty good year, probably a career year. I don't know across the board in terms of stats, but it definitely seemed like Lance had a breakout year.
No, definitely. I think I think he's a really, really promising player. He's still pretty young, and he probably. I'm going to sound a bit biased, but he had a very good case to be an all-star.
Definitely.
So yeah, definitely. I think the big thing we're going to lose with Lance is really just the ability to create threats off the dribble. And the ability to facilitate. Once he's driving, I think that was huge. Because we really had just 4 other guys standing around a lot of the time, and so it was really huge for us. And I think he was by far our most effective offensive player last season. I think people really like Paul George offensively, and I think maybe he's slightly better in some ways, but I think if you just look at the impact he had, I think Lance Stevenson was definitely our best player on that end. Our most impactful player on that end. So
I completely agree.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge loss on that end. But on the other end, I don't think it'll be. I'm going to say something pretty controversial. I don't think it'll be like a huge loss on the defensive end, simply because I think he's a lockdown defender one-on-one. But I think the problem is he's. Off the ball, I don't think he was that great of a defender. I think he wasn't the fastest guy. He didn't have the greatest first step, and so many times like you'd see him completely misreading like staggered screens. Trying to shoot over the gap when it was Curry, and you really want to be fighting over those screens because you don't want to give him like a look at the corner. So I think. I think Lance is a great on-ball defender, and I think if you're talking about defending someone like Dwayne Wade, he's really strong for his size, yeah. Lance. So I think someone like Dwayne Wade, even though he killed us in the playoffs, I think if you look back at the shots he was taking, they were really tough turnaround jumpers, and they're the shots which you say okay, in an ideal world we're going to make him take those shots, and that's what Lance did, and unfortunately he made them, and he made me miserable, but that was the thing. But I think there aren't that many 2 guards who in the league right now who really are going to. I think most 2 guards in the league right now are going to be playing more off ball, so I think he won't be the biggest loss defensively, just because I think off ball he wasn't that great. I don't know. I think some of it was sort of lack of concentration as well, but so maybe that can be corrected. Maybe that can improve. But yeah, offensively, I mean, he's a huge loss, and I think PG. Yeah, I mean, he was. I mean, defensively, I thought he was incredible. To be honest, I know a lot of people. I think there was kind of a debate whether Iguodala should have got the first defensive team instead of him. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but I personally think Iguodala is a great defender as well. But I personally think PG's. He was just a tiny bit better. He was a tiny bit more versatile. He could lock down, I think, a bigger variety of players. There is someone ridiculous, who, like, for example, Jeff Teague. In the playoffs, he was killing us because, well, for a few reasons, but one of the reasons was that, Hill couldn't really keep up with him after a while, and George was, he did a great job over the last 2 games of really locking down on him, and a lot of that was just from good. It was boring fundamentals, which everyone talks about, like staying low, staying balanced, being able to move, always moving so that you can fight over the screens. Those boring fundamentals, I think, he does excellently, and he was a great defender. He had great hands and everything, and offensively, he was. I mean, he won Player of the Month in the Eastern Conference in November, which I think is huge. Like, I think right now that award should probably be renamed the LeBron James Award. So I think that's huge. So he was great offensively. I think coming into the preseason, he was really talking about. He said that he was really inspired by Kevin Durant and him. Shooting, becoming part of the 50-40-90 club. And you could see that he really worked on his shooting, which prior to the season had been fairly, it'd been decent, but quite inconsistent.
Yeah.
And the big thing he worked on was really his footwork, especially off the catch and shoot. He was now much more consistent with his footwork. And that was great. But, unfortunately, as the season went on, just his shooting stroke kind of deteriorated. I actually made a post about it, and there was just a few things which went wrong. One of the big things was his footwork, especially off the dribble. I was like, after a while, he was, players, like, when they don't get a good angle at the basket and they need to shoot, they usually like twist in midair to like get a better angle. And and that's like, if you can't get a good angle, that's probably the best way of adjusting, but still you're adding like that bilateral movement, which is you're adding that
torsion that's totally gonna change the vector of your shot.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't want to do it too much, but and players usually they only do it like in pretty extreme situations where they really can't get a good look at the basket. So but PG was doing it like every shot, like all the time, like even when he had a good angle at the basket, like that was the most confusing thing. Like when he was like square to the basket and he used to like twist away from the basket. It was just really weird. And then
at least you won't have to deal with that much this year. So I guess kind of a positive thing.
I'd rather deal with it than
another thing you won't have to thing you don't have to deal with this year is Evan Turner. He's a good rebounder for a guard, and he's got a decent enough handle that he can function as a tertiary ball handler for stretches, but he tends to turn it over a fair amount and shoot a lot of mid-range jumpers, so chances are the Pacers aren't going to miss him much this year. With all this...
Sorry.
I was just going to say, with all this turnover, it's kind of interesting in terms of Will's stat, and for anybody who's watching this, if you've watched our previous videos, Will and I both came up with kind of our own stats. Will's is called possession delta, which he thinks he might have made it sound too nerdy, but it's basically just either the surplus or deficit of possessions a team either gets or loses over the course of the offseason through trades, free agency, and stuff. and they had a negative 18.4 possession delta, which makes sense because not only are you losing Lance, who took up a lot of possessions, but Paul's out for the season too. So it's not that surprising that those guys' possessions are now kind of up in the air for people to kind of get expanded roles, and we'll probably see guys like George Hill, David West, even Hibbert might get a few more touches in the post. Unfortunately, Rodney Stuckey's probably going to get a fair number of touches, but it kind of is what it is. And then my stat is just kind of looking at, it's called rest differential, and it's just a comparison of a team over the course of the season in terms of road back-to-backs, 4 games and 5 nights, 3 games and 4 nights, compared to their opponents over the course of the season. And they have a positive rest differential of 14, which is at least promising that they might be able, even if everything else is going wrong this year, Leon, they should be able to at least eke out a couple of wins against teams on those like 4th game in a 5 days type scenario where the Pacers are a little more rested than them.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty sad state of affairs when like that's probably one of our main one of the main ways we're going to get wins.
Yay, we're rested.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of different, but yeah, I think as you said, there's a huge roster turnover. Yeah, I mean, oh god, our starting lineup tonight was it wasn't great to look at.
Yeah,
I think it was arguably like the combination of like the two of the worst starting lineups you'll probably be facing off against each other in a really long time.
So, considering it was them playing against the Sixers, this is going to be a nice lead into the section Will and I do in our videos called 5 Questions, which is straightforward. 5 questions we ask each other just to cover topics that we might not otherwise get to. And since they were playing the Sixers tonight, I think Will came up with this question. Is it possible that this team might wind up tanking this year? Because, I mean, Paul's gone for the year. There's no more Lance. There's a void of shot creation. Vogel kind of historically over his time hasn't really implemented much ball movement or player movement, really, creating a stagnant offense. And with that loss of shot creation, this team could be pretty bad. Might they bite the bullet and kind of say, F it, let's go the Sixer route?
So I personally think they won't, but I personally think that there's, definitely a good argument to be made to go down that route. As you said, I think people are citing kind of the Spurs as an example when Robinson went out for a year injured, and they tanked. Well, they didn't do too well. They got Duncan, and now it's 2014 and they're still NBA champions.
Yeah.
So that's a good example to look up to. But and I think it definitely makes sense. I really don't think we're gonna make the playoffs. I think David West was supposedly considering retirement. I don't know how much veracity there is to that statement, but to that rumor, sorry. But and yeah, just a lot of our team right now isn't that great, and but we do have one of the best two-way players coming back next season. Yep. So I think there's a real argument to be made that it would be really advantageous to us to really try and trade like West, for example, if we can, and maybe even Hill and players like that, and just try and get as many assets as we can and rebuild and have PG as kind of the face of that franchise, and yeah. So I think it's very logical. A lot of people I've seen on Reddit, really think that's what we should do, and I completely see that argument. It's just, I think if you look at Larry Bird and how he's run things over the last 10 years, it really isn't the way he's historically done it. Obviously that doesn't mean he's not going to change the way he does things in the future, but, I just think if you look at some of our teams over the last 10 years, we really could have very easily just tanked. We didn't have very good teams for a lot of those years, but in the end we struggled, to get like as many wins as we could, and we ended up with kind of late first round picks and things like that, when we could have really got lottery picks. We could have got really good picks, and so. And just hearing Larry Bird from interviews, just how he is generally, he seems to, there was this interview he did with Bill Simmons, and he talks about how he doesn't like, people hugging each other before games, and he says, it's really your responsibility to win as many games as you can, because you got lots of people depending on you and things like that.
Yep.
So I think it's kind of ingrained in his mentality. I think if the front office came to him and said, okay, I think we're going to win 15 games this season.
Yeah.
We should
we'll be battling the Sixers for worst record. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if the front office said that to him, I think his first reaction would be okay, well, let's try and win 20 games,
Yeah, yeah.
Which isn't a great way, long.
Probably not the best way to look at it, but
I think that's. Yeah, sorry.
Given the kind of potential variability that might be going on with this team in terms of win-loss record over the course of the year, and you mentioned David West might be somebody who could get moved. What about maybe Roy Hibbert? He might be he had a rough end of the year last year, let's be honest, but there's nobody quite like him in terms of rim protection, and there are several teams out there that are really looking for one, including Boston, and we know Danny Ainge has all sorts of assets all the time. Do you think Roy might wind up getting traded if the things kind of go off the wheels this year?
I think things would have to go really off the wheels. I think we would really have to be neck and neck with the 76ers, because I think if we trade Hibbert, because he's he does suck on offense, but at the end of the day, he's still probably our most important player just because of how huge he is on defense. So I think if we do trade him, then it's clearly a sign that, okay, we've completely given up. We're not going to make it with Hill and George and those guys, so we're just going to start again and keep George and maybe keep Hill, I don't know, but just try and start again. But yeah, so I personally think, I don't know, there were rumors again that they were looking to trade him, so again, I don't know if those rumors were true, and I don't know if if they may have just been inquiring, what they could get for him, really.
Yeah.
So I don't really know 100%, but I think if they do trade him, then it's really. I think it really signals that they've kind of given up on.
It's the white flag.
Yeah. But yeah, like you said, he's a great rim protector. I think a lot of people will look at his size and they'll think, hey, you worked with Kareem over the summer. Maybe he's...
Yeah, exactly. He can't be as bad offensively as he was after the All-Star break last year, right?
And to be fair, I think I think we'll really see, because I think he's going to be really called upon on offense. So I think we'll see. really how he is. I don't think he'll be able to hide. But
exactly.
But I think like from what I saw in preseason, he seems to have improved. Like just just the way he fights for low post position and things like that, and his movement off the ball. When the ball swings across, he moves well. Like he slides his feet well and things like just little things like that.
That's good.
Still only has one post move, but yeah. So I don't know. So maybe and like you said, teams. Like rim protection is huge. If you can get like a really good rim protector, the Pacers are a testament to that. Really, I mean, I know we have ridiculously good defenders, 1 through 5, but we were relying if we didn't have Hibbert, then it would have been really ugly at times, the defense. So I think I mean, rim protection is huge. I guess especially now because offensively centers aren't such a huge threat, so defensively you can focus on the rim and play that the role of that 2-9, as people say, a bit. So yeah, I think you're right. I think people may be willing to take a chance on him and think I think this guy could be Shaq, and things like that. And so yeah, we could get decent offers. It'll be interesting anyway. But yeah, I think if we give him up, then it's pretty clear that unless Bird has this crazy elaborate master plan.
Yeah, unless he's got something up his sleeve that no one knows about. Also, something that could be kind of interesting. I know Will. Unfortunately, Will can't comment on it, but Will is pretty high on George Hill. He likes George Hill. He thinks George Hill is going to get some of those possessions that Lance and Paul had, and that Hill should do well in those extra possessions. What do you think we can kind of expect out of George Hill this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also a huge fan of his. I think last season he like I said, he was third bottom he was third worst amongst all point guards for cutting inside, and I think we saw him spotting up. I'm pretty sure I saw today that 40% of his shots were 3-point attempts, and which for us that's a huge thing because we wouldn't hit many threes. So yeah, I think he was really just spotting up a lot, and I think he wasn't really doing that much on offense. And throughout the off season, he's spoken about being more aggressive and things like that. And in the preseason, it wasn't a night and day difference by any means. You could tell he was still George Hill. He was still the same guy, but he was more aggressive. Yeah, and especially off, we were running a lot of dribble handoff plays, and he was doing a good job of cutting inside with those. So yeah, I mean, I think he's a pretty good shooter as well. So I think he could have he could put up some nice numbers. I think he's a really underrated defender. I think he's a terrific defender. So yeah, I think he'll have a good season, basically.
I agree.
I think he's out for 3 weeks, right?
Huh?
I think he's out for 3 weeks, right?
Something like that. But and this kind of leads into the last 2 of the 5 questions, which we've already kind of addressed before, which is not only how are the loss of Lance and George going to affect the defense, but how is the team going to fare offensively without those primary shot creators? And we've already touched on them a little bit, but I think we'll see some more touches for Hibbert in the post. We'll see some more pick and rolls run with Hill and David West. And we will probably, unfortunately, see some Rodney Stuckey ISOs and pick and rolls. But hopefully we'll also see a few more, maybe a little more movement elements. Hopefully we'll see a little more floor spacing from guys in the rotation. So hopefully it won't be entirely hopefully Leon's not gonna want to swear off basketball after this year.
Yeah, it was kind of funny actually because it was weird. Like, I essentially had like an existential crisis during the playoffs. Like, I remember it was Game 5 against the Hawks. It was that game where Hibbert had like 0.0 rebounds. And it was just horrible to watch. Like, it was really depressing to watch. Like, you could see like Lance was like refusing to pass to Hibbert. And then like Hibbert, who usually was like, as soon as he'd get double teamed, he was actually a pretty good passer out of the post, and he'd always make the right passes and things like that. But like now, like as soon as he'd get double teamed, he was just going for that running hook shot anyway, and it was just really ugly to watch and like really depressing to watch as a fan. And I remember like at the end of it, I was like, what? I was really like, questioning who I was as a person, because like I was finding it really entertaining. I was still watching it every day. I was like reading up about all the players and stuff like that, and I was asking myself like, why? Because this is just really, this makes me miserable right now.
Like, am I a bit masochistic? Like why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah. So yeah, that's generally like a sign that like if you have like an existential crisis after having watched your team play basketball, they're probably not doing too well. But I think in the preseason, I mean, we ran a lot more like the offense was a lot more structured, which it's great. The plays themselves, they weren't. I mean, I personally wasn't a big fan of them just because it was pretty basic, like ball reversal.
Nobody's gonna confuse them with the Spurs or the Mavs offensively.
No, that's kind of funny because talking about the Spurs, because like they obviously they run like that infamous motion offense, and they run it like perfectly. Like you probably can't run it any better than they do, or at least they did last season. And we would sometimes run a 4-1 motion offense like they did, but it was ugly. Like it was It was funny because it's called a motion offense, so you think there's going to be movement. There was no movement at all. It was literally just ball reversal, and then like the guy on the wing would look at Hibbert, who was like struggling to get good post position. They'd look at him for like 2 seconds. You could tell they were thinking like, "Is this really our only option?" And then they'd throw it to him, and yeah, that was it. And but. Yeah, so like in the preseason, we were running slightly more structured stuff. There was actually a Princeton set which we were running, which looked pretty nice. But the problem was most of the sets, they had some nice stuff going on the weak side, but on the strong side, it would often end up with like someone at the mid post area and like a dribble handoff, so like a 2-man game with like someone like David West at the post area and someone like Hill, and that's not like insanely effective, especially when you got like Stuckey and Hibbert on the weak side. Like you're not gonna get like clear driving lanes there. People are gonna help, and it's not gonna be that effective. So. Yeah, we ended up running like a lot of post-ups. So I don't know if that'll be like great for. I don't think it'll be like particularly effective. We're not going to get great spacing, and we don't have play. West is good at the low post. Scola's pretty good as well. He's got nice post moves. But you're going to need like very good ball movement to get good low post positioning, and I don't think we'll get that. So I think, if the preseason is anything to go by, then I think we'll have a better offense than we did at the end of last season, because there'll actually be some structure to it, which is good. Yeah. but I don't think it'll be like insanely effective.
Yeah.
But to be fair, in the game, I only got to see the first half, so if anyone's like commenting, do not like the score of the game, because that'll be But yeah, from what I saw in the first half, we were running a nice variety of plays. We were running, you talk about the Spurs. We were running the loop play for Stuckey, which he's still fairly quick, so it's suited for him. He can get good penetration off of that. We ran like floppy action for Copeland, who's probably, I think he's. Yeah, it's kind of depressing to say he's probably our best three-point shooter maybe Watson can rival him, but yeah.
I don't want to throw you into a full bore depression, but there could be an argument made that Copeland's your best offensive player, period, right now.
Yeah, that's depressing, but
sorry.
but that's true. Yeah, I mean, all the fans love Copeland. I think because it was such a relief when he came onto the court, because it was so obvious we were missing good spacing and just anything on offense, and he could provide it at a pretty consistent rate. So I think everyone loves him, but going back to the point, I think in the 76ers game we seem to be running some nice plays, and one thing I liked was we were pushing the ball a bit more in transition. I think Stuckey will kind of benefit from that the most. We'll I mean, I'm not I don't have my hopes up by any means, but we'll see. I don't think it can be as bad as 29th in the like it was after the All-Star 29th offensive rating. I don't think it'll be that bad. I think but I'm really hoping we don't resort to just infinite Hibbert post and ISOs. That's all I'm hoping. Even if we get 60 points off of deep plays, I'd prefer that.
Yeah. Speaking of things we're hoping for and things we're kind of thinking or expecting of the season, at the Hoops Guys, we have this thing we like to do in every video, which is called 20-50-80. And everybody who does season previews does predictions. This is our way of doing predictions, where we're able to say some crazy shit, some mediocre shit, and some not so crazy shit, and be able to get away with it. So it's how it sounds. 20 is 20% likely, 50% likely, 80% likely. So Leon, what do you think is 20% likely to happen this year for the Pacers?
Okay, I went for kind of a random one, I guess. I said there's a 20% chance that David West will be traded. So yeah, I just think, like I said, he considered retirement. I think his contract, it's maybe a tiny bit too big. I don't think it's, I don't think he's getting ridiculously overpaid, but I think it's probably a bit too big for the player he is now. So I'm just thinking, if he was considering retirement in the off season, there's a decent chance he'll retire, especially after having to, share the floor with Stuckey for so long.
Yeah,
I think there's a decent chance he'll retire. There's, I don't know, but I would imagine there's a decent chance he might retire at the end of the season. So, I could imagine the Pacers looking to, force something, and then on the other side, on the demand side, if you like, I could, I think he's a very good rim protector for his size and his position. I think he's still very good from mid-range and those long twos, so I think he can keep driving lanes fairly open. Obviously, a lot of power forwards now, they can shoot threes and things, but still, I mean, being able to shoot the long two, it's very useful. It can really spread the floor still, and yeah, he's still a great defender, especially in the low post, I think, and he's a pretty good offensive president in the low post himself. So I could really personally imagine like a team. I think the team would have to be pretty desperate.
Yeah.
You know, like in desperation mode. But I could see it happening like mid-season, like a team thinking, okay, we have a decent chance of winning, like a top 4 in their conference team thinking, okay, we have a really good chance of winning, but we want the option to go small, but we want to have decent rim protection at the same time. Okay, let's go for West. You know, we know he's, like I said, he's a good rim protector, good. You know, he's a lockdown defender 1-on-1. He can. You know, he hedged all season against the pick and roll. He's shown that
his age too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive for his age. Yeah, and you know, he can ice very well. He started off last season icing, and he showed that he could do that very well. So I think I could see some teams who are considering like trying to go small whilst not losing too much on the rim protection side of things, thinking, okay, let's just whatever, let's just go for it. You know, I haven't really like messed around on the trade machine or anything, so I don't know if like any teams have very good assets to offer, but you know, I think it's something which is interesting anyway.
I concur. What do you think is 50% likely to happen this year?
Okay, I think this is maybe a bit generous, but I don't know. I said I think there's a 50% chance that we'll finish top 8 in defensive rating. So, in other words, I think there's a 50% chance that Roy Hibbert will be a very good rim protector again. Because otherwise, that's probably not going to happen. And that, like, especially with the defensive scheme we have right now, if Roy isn't going to, you know, if he isn't going to be a great rim protector, then we're going to look pretty bad on defense. To be fair, Solomon Hill, who's going to be, well, as of right now, it seems like he'll be starting small forward. I've been really impressed with his defense, especially, you know, I saw him in the preseason. You know, like against LeBron, he played really well. I think LeBron still dropped like 30 on him, but, you know, like, he played like really great defense on him, which I was surprised by because I thought, just looking at him physically, I thought, okay, he might be a bit overpowered by someone like LeBron.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case at all. So, you know, I don't think we'll, you know, we've still got West, we've still got Hill.
Yeah.
That's George Hill, sorry. And I think, like I said, Solomon Hill, he looks like a good defender. So, you know, I think on that side, we're okay, but yeah, it's really going to depend on Roy Hibbert, really, and how he protects the rim, really. And I don't think anyone can predict that right now. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great 50-50. What do you think is 80% likely to happen?
Okay, this is kind of interesting. I said 80% we won't make the playoffs. It's only interesting because I felt like if Hill, if Hill, West, and CJ weren't injured, then I think we would have like a decent chance of just sneaking into the playoffs because I felt like I don't know I don't know who you think will be fighting for the 8th seed, but like a lot of people, for example, they look at like the Knicks, the Pistons.
Yeah,
exactly, and like those 3 teams, they've got new coaches, so there's going to be like, you know, and the Nets last season showed this; they're a perfect example of this. There's going to be like an adjustment period, and it's going to be, you know, it's going to be like a considerable adjustment period. And I felt like before the injuries we sustained over the last like week or so, I felt like, you know, we could maybe that would be to our benefit, like. You know, over the first month or so, we could scrape like enough of a lead over those teams that you know, we could still like just about make
into it. Yeah.
But I think now that like those guys are injured, we don't have that advantage. So I think I don't think we'll make it personally. You know, I don't think it's like 100%. I think there is like a 20% chance.
I think you're spot on. I think in the East, what happens if Melo gets injured or something, and the Nets are still struggling with Brooke and Darren's health? All of a sudden, maybe that 8th spot is a little more possible. And in the East, where you can get into the playoffs with a sub 500 record, everybody's technically got a shot. So I think you're on point.
I think especially like if we get the top 8 defensive rating, I think there's like an outside chance our defense gets us there. I could see that happening, but I don't. I still think it's like a 20% chance that'll happen. So
Speaking of a 20% chance, my 20% likely is that Vogel is fired after they get off to a start akin to the Sixers. Now, this might sound somewhat bold, especially since Vogel just got an extension, and Larry Bird and Kevin Pritchard are very team cohesion, continuity type guys. Mm-hmm. But remember, it's 20%, so I think it's 80% likely it doesn't happen. I just think if they get off to a really, really bad start, it's possible.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think it did really seem like he was under pressure at some points last season. Like, it did really seem like his job wasn't the most secure coaching job in the NBA. And I think also the front office, if they do see this as like kind of a rebuilding, like a year zero where like anything goes, they may just say, okay, well, we don't think Vogel is like let's say like a championship caliber coach. It might be best for us to get rid of him now, now that like now that we're making like all these adjustments and things, so that we have continuity going forward. So I mean, I think there's like an outside chance, but I think like you said, the front office is pretty loyal, and I think the fans seem to like him overall. I think we all are kind of annoyed with the stagnant offense, but it's I think overall he's got a good record and everything. So I think people generally, which I think is usually the first thing people look at when they judge coaches, and I think I think 20% is probably right.
Yeah. This kind of builds on your 20% about David West. I think it's 50% likely that they make some move, some trade this season. I don't know if it'll be like a major move, like moving a Hibbert type, or if it'll be something somewhat more minor. But I have a feeling that this won't be the same roster necessarily by the end of the year.
Yeah, it'd be great if we brought back Evan Turner for another half of the season. Like, that would just be really confusing.
That would be a fun thing, just in the sense of how confused everybody would be if that happened.
Yeah, I feel like at that point, like, people would question like Larry Bird's like mental health, or like if he even cares about the team anymore.
Like, is Larry like just trying to punk everybody, or is he just
like, laughing joke?
Screw it, I'm done.
And the fans are laughing. So, I could see it in all honesty. I could see. I mean, we have so many like really raw players, I think, right now. I mean, like, for example, Avoy Allen. To be fair, he's like decent from mid-range, but I don't think that's a reason that's enough to keep someone really. So like players like that, and even like Rudez, we don't really know how he'll pan out. So I could see it happening. I don't think it's hard to be like. Let's put it this way: it's hard to be happy. It's hard to be happy with this team after getting to the Eastern Conference Finals for 2 years in a row.
Yeah, and then what's likely to transpire this year, which I also think it's hard to be happy with what I'm about to say for my 80% likely, which is, and I'm sorry, Will, I know you're listening somewhere. I think it's 80% likely that Rodney Stuckey leads the Pacers in shot attempts per game. Cue Will barfing somewhere off screen.
Yeah, well, the more disgusting part of that is that, like, most of the 20% is coming from, like, the possibility that, like, we're just going to force feed Hibbert post shot.
Exactly.
That's the most worrying part of that percentage.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I would I'd agree with that. I think I honestly think like in transition he could be useful for us, and I think it'll depend on like how well our offense is run. But yeah, he's really like one of our few players who can like cut inside and do anything, and we don't have like too many spot up threats. We have like a few pieces, but I don't think enough for us to really count on that. So I could see him having a huge offensive role, which is a bit depressing, but whatever.
Yeah.
He did pretty well. He was doing pretty well against the 76ers. He was doing like his thing, getting to the rim. So yeah, I mean,
yeah. On that note, we'll tie things up. Ultimately, the biggest question is this team going to be good? Will says it's either going to be 500-ish or an utter disaster. I think it's a big NARP. For anybody who's a fan of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, World's End, the Cornetto trilogy, I'm a huge fan of those. So when I say NARP, that means no. I think it's going to be a big drop-off for them. Leon, what do you think?
I think, I mean, I have like completely, as a fan, I have completely different like expectations. Like I just want to see like Hibbert improve. I just want to see Solomon Hill, become decent. But yeah, I think if you're neutral and you're looking at this team, and I mean, either way, it's going to be ugly because, like, at best, in a perfect situation, we're going to be like a decent defensive team who struggles on offense. It's going to be ugly even in that situation, but yeah, I think I mean, we'll see. I don't think looking at the preseason, the offense wasn't great. It was a lot more structured, to be fair, which is a big step in the right direction. But it really wasn't great, and we don't have players who can create much. We just have like a lot of little pieces on the offensive end, and so I think it's going to be pretty bad. I may have like a stroke at some point.
Will and I will try to keep in touch with you to make sure that you don't communicate with us after like a week. We'll call the like paramedics or something and try to make sure that you didn't like have a stroke or pass out and are in a coma after watching a particularly bad game.
Yeah, I may just like literally like jump off the face of the earth. Also, that's like another possibility.
Well, Will and I hope you don't. We also really, really want to thank you once again for taking the time to sit in on this preview with us. We love your stuff on RNBA. Anybody who's watching this live right now, if you're watching it later, please look him up on RNBA. His posts are stellar. The guy kicks mucho ass. So thank you so very much, Leon. And you're more than welcome anytime you ever want to come on, whether it's to talk Pacers or to plug some research you've been doing, or even just to shoot the shit with us, because it's a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, and yeah, best of luck with this.
Thank you.
I've honestly really liked the videos you've done so far. I know, even if I hated them, I'd probably say that anyway. But
Well, I
really,
appreciate that.
yeah, no, honestly, I think they were, it was a great combination of being informative, funny, uh, and really engaging, which I think can be hard for, you know, for like basketball videos. I think sometimes, like it's sometimes hard to make something which is immediately engaging, but you guys have done that, so well done, and I hope you guys continue. And yeah, best of luck.
Thank you so much for the praise, Leon. Speaking of our channel, if you liked this video, whether you're watching it live right now or when it's posted later on our channel, if you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, feel free to give us a thumbs down. Give us the Sixers stink face. If you wanted to make a comment, maybe to refute a point we made, or maybe to talk about how great Rodney Stuckey or Evan Turner are, by all means, throw them in the comments.
Do not tell me the score of the game, though.
Yeah.
So I will have a.
Yeah. Don't spoil it. And if you really do enjoy our videos, please hit that subscribe button, and it'll let you know when we have new videos coming on, and also it'll maybe give you an opportunity to go back and watch some of our other videos. So thanks so much for watching. Thank you again, Leon, for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their evening.